years and met Jason when I decided to rebrand my business and build an estate agency website along with FL1. And so that's kind of what I do now. Basically, now that I've sold my business, I do loads of social media marketing and I build websites along with Jason for loads of estate agents across the UK, and I write all the content. I'm a level 4 examiner for our industry, so I'm sort of the go-to person, I guess, to know what's going on in property, and so I can write lots of interesting content, sort of another string to our bow rather than just a developer that can just build a website and then you've got to write the content yourself. So that's me. Hi.
So I'm Kathy. I currently work for a company called Aerocloud Systems. We're based in Macclesfield up in the northwest, and we make or create software for airport operations. So we're quite niche, and we sell into airports across North America, Europe and UK, and I pick up the marketing piece for them, which is primarily digital. Jason and I go back a long way. I've freelanced for the last 16 years. I've done it around the kids and brought quite a few pieces of work to you, have now, and worked with you on different projects. So for me, this workshop is with GA4 coming in. I have to be honest, I need to start again in terms of knowing how to use the dashboards, because yeah, they're quite different, aren't they, to how they used to be. So yeah, today for me is hopefully a big learning curve.
Hi there, Mark Bate from Bate Brand. I now work from a home studio on the Isle of Wight. I've been pretty much self-employed for the last 25 plus years, doing branding, graphics work, and quite a lot of web design work and app development, hence working with Jason quite a bit over the last few years. And again, as you just said, the changes that have been brought in, I just kind of feel I need to make sure that I'm up to date with everything, so I can be telling my customers accurately what they need to be doing. And I thought jumping on a Zoom with Jason would be quicker than me doing all the research myself. So
hi, I'm supposedly retired, but I'm involved with a sailing club where we run a regatta every year called Burnham Week, which is very if you know Cows Week, it's the East Coast answer to Cows Week. Finding volunteers these days is really difficult. We have a website because I found Jason, he set up the website for us because everything's being done obviously in that way now. But with the sponsorship that we need to get to be able to run the event, we need to be able to prove that we're actually reaching out to the people we're trying to get to. I don't know anything about Google Analytics, and I'm hoping to find out something about it now.
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm one of the designers at FL1, and I also do some content migration stuff. And just a few of our clients were asking about GA4, so I thought I would just join today to learn a bit more.
Okay, this is Gatsby. She's here to learn about GA4 as well. And drink my water. Okay, so what we're going to be looking at today, we're really just going to be looking at the basics. So the whole idea is today then we're going to be looking at how to install GA4. We'll then look at how we can transfer the data over. There is a built-in migration wizard with GA4, so we'll look at some of the options that you need to have in there. If I'm completely truthful, I think Google make it a lot more complicated than it needs to be. So actually, really, there's just the fundamentals. I think if you can see that in place, then you should be good to go. So there are a few differences. So just by a quick side-by-side comparison before we jump in. So largely, you'll find that cross-domain tracking, so this is where you can track traffic between different domains coming to your website. That's supported in both versions. So that's something that continued. With GA4, just like Universal Analytics, you can link it up with your Google Ads if you're using Google advertising. It also links with other Google products, which you'd expect. So that's carried on as well. You've got a data import there and a migration tool with GA4 that's built in. You've also got Looker Studio, which is something I've yet to really explore into, but it's kind of like a data analysis and big data tool for Google, but that's also supported with GA4. In terms of a general comparison, what I would say is that the pre-configured reports are a lot easier in Universal Analytics. So it's a lot easier just to jump into each section and have a good snapshot of all the different things. That, in my opinion, is really where GA4 doesn't do so well. The out-of-the-box reports, there's just not as many of them and they're not as easy to find. I'd imagine this is probably the first thing that you guys have also found when you look at GA4 as well. What you will find though is the ad hoc reporting in terms of just creating reports on the fly is much more sophisticated and powerful in GA4, but it's a steeper learning curve. What I find is most businesses don't want to have to go in there and configure their own reports. They just want to kind of create a simple dashboard and look at what's already there. So in my opinion, this is probably one of the areas of which GA4 is not as good, if you like, or not as easy to become instantly useful with. One of the things that is not always easy to find, but was in Universal Analytics and is also in GA4, is the fact that you can actually filter out traffic. So you can filter out things by IP address. Now, if you've ever set up Universal Analytics to, for example, ignore any requests from your own IP address, you'll know how valuable that is. And if you've never done anything like this, the reason you might do this is, if you could imagine, you might have all your own users on your own network within your business. You've got a static IP address. It actually is just a convenient way to filter out all of your traffic, because what people overlook is they look at things like tools like analytics, they look at all the visitors and all the page views, and they overlook the fact that actually probably a larger part of all those visits and page views are them or their organization or their team. So sometimes it's just easy to be able to sort of filter all of that out and have a different view. So you almost get an idea of all the traffic, and then you have an alternative view which shows you all the traffic, less you. So in other words, the rest of the world, if you like. So that's something that also GA4 carries over, which is quite useful. You've got automatic tracking, which is built in, which I have to say is one of the strong points. And I'll explain a little bit more about that later. This is, I think once you realize what it does and how it works, you'll see just how powerful that really is. And lastly, then also you've got attribution. Now, that's going to be a bit beyond the scope of what we do today, but an attribution model in Google Analytics is the whole idea of what it can do is track your measured outcomes. So when we talk about attribution, we might say, if we've got different clumps or different sources of visitors, let's imagine you might have Jane coming from my website, say from a Google ad, then she might come back from a Google search, then she might follow a search campaign. Google Analytics is able to look at those 3 different visits, recognize they're broadly likely to be the same person. And then if we've got a conversion, so let's imagine then Jane comes and actually books something at the end of it, what we can do is we can work out how we attribute that. So in other words, do we say that all 3 of those visits are part of that? So in other words, we give it equal attribution, or do we say that actually I'm just going to attribute it to that last conversion, or am I going to attribute that success to the first time Jane came over? So in other words, the first time a piece of marketing hit her and enticed her into our website. So that's in a high level how an attribution model works and the sort of thing you want to do. And again, that's something that's also supported with GA4. Okay, right. So let's have a quick look then in terms of how analytics fundamentally works. I'm just going to expand a little bit more on my screen here. Annie, this is probably for you as well. So basics then. How does an analytics system work at all? So I'm just here on a website called whatismybrowser.com. So the way that analytics systems work is when I put a web address into my browser, I send it all the way across the internet. It will then route through the internet using a service called DNS to the web server. The web server picks up that request. Based on the information passed through, it works out how to best service that request. So once it's done that, it will then hit the database, build the website out, deliver whatever pages, graphics, content you need. That gets routed all the way back through the internet. It then gets rendered to your browser. Okay, every web page in the world ever works in exactly the same way. But there's a bit more to it than goes on there. So what actually happens is when you create that request, so you might go into your browser and put https://www.something, you're sending what's called a HTTP request. Now, with every HTTP request, what you don't realize is there's something called a header that gets sent through as well. So the header then contains information about the user's browser. So what sort of information does it use? Say, for example, if we have a look here, this is what it can see from me. It can see the IP address that I'm looking at it from. It can see what internet service I'm using. It knows what computer screen I'm using. It knows what browser I'm using. It knows what this will support. Does my browser support, for example, JavaScript? Does it support Adobe Flash? Various other things. All that information then is passed across as part of that HTTP request. Why is that passed across? Well, the simple reason it actually goes all the way back to the beginning of the World Wide Web, so that even the very, very early browsers did exactly the same thing. And the main reason is that the browser sends through the details of its capability and what it's running on, so that the actual web server is able to make a request as best how to service that request. For example, what we used to see even 10, 15 years ago is What the web server will be doing is look at the dimensions of the user's computer to try and work out whether on a large screen or a small screen, and it might make the decision to serve up a mobile site if it's on a small screen, or it might make the decision to serve up a full-blown site if it's on a larger screen. In fact, if you want to see that, there's still remnants of this today. If you go out on your mobile phone now, walk into the street, please look where you're going before you cross the road. But if you Googled something like facebook.com, what you'll actually find is it doesn't take you to www.facebook.com. It actually takes you to m.facebook.com. So Facebook has a whole mobile version of its website specifically designed for this. And that's not all. Google does exactly the same thing. So even if you went into a web browser now and typed m.google.com, you'll see Google's mobile version. So even services like that to this day still work in that same way. Now, this is the thing. If any of you have worked with websites recently, you're all aware that sites these days need to work on a mobile. And we're all familiar with the whole idea of responsive website. So what's a responsive website? Well, a responsive website is a website that will respond to the screen size it's going to be working on or the device that it's working on. Now, the truth of the matter is with CSS3, it's possible to do things like make a website that will respond. You've got things called media queries that are starting rules that are based on the size of the web page. And you've also got something called a viewport, which allows you to zoom in and zoom out your page. In earlier versions of HTML and CSS, that just didn't exist. So even going back to CSS2 around about 2010, actually having a responsive website just wasn't possible or even practical. So this really has its legacy all the way back to that. So what's this got to do with Google Analytics? Well, Google Analytics fundamentally then is using this same information. So this is how it knows where you are in the world, knows what screen sizes you are, knows what type of browser you're on, can guess the operating system, therefore it can guess the device, all of this kind of information. The other little thing that Google has is, if you think about it, quick show of hands, who now on their browser is logged into Google? So you may or may not remember when you first signed up for that Google account all the way back when, it asks you a couple of questions. It says, what's your date of birth and what's your gender? You've probably forgotten that. I've forgotten that as well. But if you're signed into your browser, Google is able to access that information. It doesn't necessarily use your personal information, but it can use that when it starts to report on demographic information. So it will know generally if we're dealing with females, it will know your sort of age, that kind of thing. So if you start to see some of that information, and bear in mind that Google doesn't have permission to do that with everyone, and not everyone is even logged into Google, but that's kind of where it can glean that kind of information from. One thing that Google doesn't have though, and this has always been a big problem for Google, it continues to play Google. What Google doesn't know is what you like, who you're connected with, who you're friends with, what your hobbies are, what social groups you're part of, what sort of things you're reading. We all know who has that information. That's going to be the likes of Facebook. Even if we look back, Google has been trying to build out its own social offering. Google Plus was the most recent. That was its fourth attempt at trying to build a social network. So it does make you think just how powerful things like analytics tools might be if Google did have that kind of social information as well. Okay, so when we're dealing with analytics then, is they work in two different ways. One, they could either run on a server. So every time you put a request across to the internet, every single file you access on your website is logged into a file. So server-driven analytics will basically analyze that file for you. The way that Google Analytics works is it has a small piece of code that actually runs on every single page within the browser. The difference is here is that with Google Analytics, the page actually needs to have reached a browser, in order to actually run and render. So although it might not be 100% accurate, what it is accurate for are pages that have actually ended up in front of a browser in front of someone. Okay, so with Google Analytics then, I think the main thing is the way that it actually works is quite different. So one thing you will find then with the new Google Analytics is the bounce rate is no more, which I'm really happy about. Bounce rates definitely needed to be taken around the back and shot. They were so completely misunderstood and misused. So the main thing though is I'll let the cat out of the bag. This is the big difference in terms of how they work. With Universal Analytics, the way that it worked is you'd have a page served up in the browser, it would run the piece of code, take all the information about the browser, the environment, etc., post it back to Google. Google then starts recording. It starts what's called a session. So it's sat there listening to what's going to happen next. Now, at this point, it would sit there, and if nothing happened again within the next 30 so minutes, it would time that session out and go, oh, well, they must have bounced. They've gone. Now, the reality is people look at bounce rate and go, this is bad. People have got to my website and been disgusted and left immediately. Quite often that was not the case at all. Now, the difference then is with GA4, it's completely different. With GA4, it hooks into something called the document object model. Now, as web developers, I can tell you what that is. So the document then is actually the web page loaded into your browser. The document object model is what JavaScript on your page uses to interact with the different elements on the page. So if you've got, say, for example, animation on the site, like scrolling banners or things that flash or hide interactively, that would be JavaScript using the document object model to manipulate your page. Now, here's the thing. Every time that I move over a page or I scroll or I click, it raises an event in the document object model. Now, the big difference with GA4 is it can hook into that. So it's able to listen to clicks, form submissions, clicking on outbound links, scrolls, all of that interactivity. It can just sit there and listen because it's hooked into the document object model. Universal Analytics wasn't able to do that. That was just fundamentally not how it worked at all. Universal Analytics is if you had a page view followed by another page view, it could say, I've seen 2 page view, therefore this guy must be still on the website. So simplistic, but no way is as accurate. Now, the GA4 way of doing things is a game changer because now it's able to hook into any web page, work out if you've submitted a form. You don't need to tell it that there's a form. It just knows. It listens for the form submission event. It can listen to button clicks. So for the first time, things like clicking on a button to open an external PDF, it can track that. It can listen to that button click. Previous versions, you didn't. You had to literally go into your website, hard code in a manual piece of code to trigger an event that says, by the way, this button has been clicked. Clicks off to outbound websites. Again, Universal Analytics wasn't able to track that kind of thing. Not only that, you will find there are other types of events that can be set up as well. So say, for example, on our website, I'm using things like live chat. So I've got events installed, again, straight out of the box. So I know that if my chat's been started, I know if the chat's been closed, I know if the chat survey's been completed. And all of this is literally plug and play straight out of the box. So just to give you a quick idea then, and sod's law, it's gone. Here we go. Let's just quickly load it up again. This is just a quick snapshot in terms of all the events. Although annoyingly, I had this all up in front of me. There we go. Here we go. I'll take it from my notes. Here we go. So for example, a page view is one type of event. So in other words, whether the page has been viewed. User engagement. So this is an interesting one, right? So user engagement, whereas before Universal didn't really have much of a measure of that, what now GA4 will say is it will say, well, look, if you've scrolled or clicked or done anything at all on this page, we'll treat that as engagement, which is fair enough. It might be just a simple scroll or something along those lines. If anyone's ever worked with me on tools like Crazy Egg or Inspect, you'll see that. Whereas you do find that where you come into a page and nothing happens at all, that's really the only scenario that's going to be treated as a lack of engagement. So you've got a much, much better idea of whether people are actually interacting. So also then a session start. So this is where, if you like, we've started the recording button, hit the record button, we're now recording what's going on. Now, it could be that you come into the website for the first time, you start a session. Now, of course, I might look at 2 or 3 different pages. So I might have one session, 3 different page views. So the first visit, so in other words, the first time that we see you coming into the website, as opposed to able to track you coming in repeatedly. Again, we can see here we've got scroll, we've got things like clicks. It even smart enough to know whether a link on a page is a regular href, so in other words, a regular hyperlink, or it could be a hyperlink to a telephone number, it could be using a tel tag, or it could be using an email tag. So, you know, when you click on a hyperlink and it bounces open a new email. So that's a special mail to tag. Google Analytics 4 is able to now read your source code and understand exactly what type of link it is. So again, you can see here, if you've got an email at the top of your website, it's able to understand that. And the good thing about this is it can just recognize it straight out of the box. It doesn't need to be pre-programmed. We've got things like form submissions. So most websites will have some sort of a form on there. It could be the contact form. It could also be, say, for example, the MailChimp sign up or whatever you've got along those lines. It could be a evaluation form, some sort of onboarding form. It's able to, again, from the document object model, understand that there are forms on the website and know when they've been triggered, when they've been submitted. So what we've got here then is straight out of the box. You don't even need to install it, it's there. One of the nice things about it, though, is we can also set up some events. We might recognize them as website owners, whether we want to treat them differently. So whether we want to treat them as goals. So what we can do then, we might look at that and say, actually, if someone's clicked on the email, that's good. There's an intent to get in front of me. Form submission, that's also a good one. We can actually mark those as conversions. So now Google Analytics 4 recognizes that they're conversions, and we want to treat them as a special kind of outcome that's a bit more meaningful. So an intent to engage or get in touch with us. Okay, any questions before I move on?
No.
Cool. All right. So how do we get started with GA4? If I'm honest, Google will have automatically created something called property. So if I go down to, let me just show you here. First thing to notice then is with GA4, if you've ever been into this situation or this area with Universal Analytics, you would have had 3 different sections. So the first one then is the account. And again, underneath our account, we can add filters on. So you might have known earlier, I talked about the whole idea of filtering out your IP address. This could be one place that you might want to do that. But generally speaking, though, at this level, though, this is your Google Analytics account as a whole. You can have various different things on the account, but this is where you usually might give access to different developers, different people that also want to give access to your account. You then have a property. Now, the property is largely exactly the same as it was with Universal Analytics. There are some differences, but it's generally the same idea. With a property then, it's not something you live in or let out through Jane. A property then is effectively an instance of things of a thing that you want to capture data for. Now, it might be that you have, say, for example, 3 different logical sites. You might have, say, for example, a blog. It might be that you have a shop with Shopify. Again, you might want to set up different properties for each one of those. Or it could just be a question of the fact that you might have a mobile app. That might be one property. You might then have a website, which is a different property. 99% of the times, as small business owners, it's likely that you can have one website, one property. That's the most typical configuration. Now, you will find then from this drop-down box, we can choose and we can pick over. So with GA4 then, with the last few months before Universal Analytics, it would have actually set you up automatically. So you will find that you're going to have a property. Usually it's going to be the name the same as your Universal Analytics property. So say, for example, socialangels.co.uk, then it will normally have GA4 at the end of it. Now, what GA4 will give you is what's called a migration wizard, which is like a tick box or a checklist of things that you might want to look through. So you'll find up in here, you'll see you've got the setup assistant. Now, the eagle-eyed of you that have worked with Universal Analytics might realize there that there's a third one missing on the right. Can someone tell you what it was? Anyone remember? So on the right with Universal Analytics, you'd have had views. So with a view then, this is where you can effectively set up a custom view of your data. So a common one might have been having like an all traffic view that shows all the traffic to your site. A second view might be, say, for example, one where your traffic's filtered out, so it takes out your internal traffic. You can have different views in different time zones, different currencies. But again, most people, 99% of the time, they're going to be dealing with one view, the default view. That's something that hasn't carried over to GA4. So now we've literally just got the 2 tabs. So conversely then, if you're managing GA4 accounts for your clients, the quick way to see which system you're in, just go into the settings and you can see straight off whether you're in UA or whether you're in GA4. So the main thing then is with the GA4 is you're going to have a setup assistant. So the setup assistant largely will take you into a screen like this, where you've got different actions to go through. Now, what I will say is there are really 2 important areas that you want to have a look at. The first one then is called the data stream. The data stream is the most important without any shadow of a doubt, because the data stream is effectively where we're going to get your data from. Now, this might be where we need to do some migration or maybe not. So if we look, say, for example, in the data stream in here, let's go in and manage that. Here then is probably the most crucial part of getting this set up. So here then we can add in a data stream. We could say where we're getting that data from. I would have thought in most cases it's going to be the web. And from this point then, what we can then do is we put in the website address. This is much like setting up Universal Analytics. What I would say is it's important that the protocol is correct. And also where we've actually got the web address, some websites are set up as, say, for example, fl1digital.com, or it might be set up as www.fl1digital.com. What I would say to you is if you're not sure which one it is, just literally Google it. And you should find, hopefully, there we go. Oh, it's taken us out. I don't necessarily want to do that. Right. So I can see in Google it's registered as fl1digital.com. It's a small nuance, but it's actually quite an important one, because Google will see www.fl1digital.com as being different from fl1digital.com. So as I can see, it's registered here with Google as fl1digital.com, in which case I need to make sure that I set up in analytics as exactly that, so not the www. Okay, so within our data stream then, there we go, is you'll notice then that we can actually set up a few other things. So it'll actually show us then what we're going to be tracking by default. So again, we can actually tick all the options that we want to have. I'd probably suggest to get them started, just choose all the defaults, let the defaults go in there. So we go in, we set the website up. How do I actually get it installed onto the site? So now, knowing that I think pretty much all you guys are WordPress based, Kathy, are you WordPress these days? That's good. I don't need to deal with Wix and stuff like that then. Good. All right. Generally speaking, I would say you've got two options. So one option is Google has a really nice bit of kit called Google Site Kit. In fact, I'm sure I had a link open to that earlier. Yeah, so Google Site Kit is a plugin by Google for WordPress. Now, what that will do is you install the plugin. What I'd recommend you do is also be logged into Google as well. So perhaps if you've got a second tab open, you're logged into your Google account. Now, when you install SiteKit, what it will actually do then is it will do all the heavy lifting for you. What it will do is, first thing it will do is open up Google and then prompt you just to give it access. So literally, if you've got Google open already, it's very, very simple. It's literally just tick the button to give it access. It will then install your website with Google Search Console. It will then ask you and say, look, these are all the different properties you've got. And if it finds one for GA4, it will use that as a default. If it doesn't, it will say, you don't have one for GA4. Do you want me to create you one? So in which case, you can do exactly that. Let Google Sitekit do all the heavy lifting for you. It will set up all the streams, all the properties straight out of the box for you, link it in, but that's not all. What it will also do is create you a nice little dashboard in the back of WordPress, which actually shows you a highlight of everything that's going on. One thing I really like about it is it actually joins together the data captured by Google Search Console, say, for example, the search terms that you might see to get to you in Google, with the data that's captured in Google Analytics, and it presents it in a nice, easy to use little dashboard in the back of WordPress. So a lot of people I'm finding using SiteKit are not even bothering using Google Analytics itself because they've got the basics that they need to know actually wired straight into the dashboard. That's one thing that you could do. Now, the other thing that you might want to consider then is using something like Google Tag Manager. So if anyone here not familiar with Tag Manager? Okay. So what Google Tag Manager is, there are three services I'd probably recommend that you need to be aware of with Google. The first one is Google Search Console. So Google Search Console is a free service. What it allows you to do is register yourself as the owner of your website. So you can register yourself fairly straightforward. In return, what it allows you to do is start a conversation with Google directly about your website. So Google will share information with you in terms of what it's finding. It will tell you, for example, when it's visiting your website, what pages it can find. It will also tell you if it's finding issues. So if you're really into search engine optimization, it's a go-to tool. So it's the first tool you want to be looking at if you're finding any issues or pages are no longer being indexed. You can go in here and use these tools to effectively work out exactly what Google thinks. You can get it to test certain pages. It will tell you what it likes, what it doesn't like, performance. All of that's built into this. Not only that, with Google Search Console, is you can register something called a sitemap. The sitemap is your way to feed data directly into Google, so it doesn't have to come out and find it for itself. You're telling it explicitly, by the way, here's a link, here's a list of all the different pages I've got on my website. Now, if you've ever used tools like Rank Math or Yoast, this has a sitemap built in, and that will link straight into Google Search Console. That's your first tool. I'm not going to go too much into that because that's beyond the scope of today, but I will put out a video about that at some point. Next then, of course, is Google Analytics, which we can talk about, but also Google Tag Manager. So what is Google Tag Manager? Well, the idea is actually pretty simple. When you own a website, the chances are you might want to have lots and lots of different pieces of code running on that. And when I talk about that sort of thing, it could be the bit of JavaScript that runs live chat, or it could be the bit of JavaScript that obviously is required for Google Analytics. It could be that you need conversion tracking codes if you're using Google Ads. It might be that you want to have a Facebook pixel on that website. You might also be using Crazy Egg or Inspectlet to analyze what people are doing on your website. So before you know it, you could end up with 4 or 5 or 6 bits of code all running on that web page. Now, here's the deal. What that can do is, first of all, it means that you need to contact people like me to get it installed. Don't mind doing that, that's fine. But it's actually better for you to be in control of that kind of thing yourself. It also means that then, without having to talk to a web developer, you can try out new tags, try out these things. You could speak to, say, for example, the guys at Lead Forensics, try out their product, put the tag on, run it, take it off. You've got control of running all those different services on your site. So the problem then really comes is that if you've got lots of bits of script like that all running, it can have a performance overhead on your website, as well as the fact that it's just fiddly to set up. So this is where Google Tag Manager comes in. The whole idea of Tag Manager is it says, tell you what, I'll have a platform, you install all of your tags with me, and we'll just run one piece of code. Google optimizes that relationship to make sure that there's no conflicts between all the tags, but moreover, it gives you a management way of which you can install tags into your website, run them, disable them, and you've got control. With a tag, you've got two things. In fact, I'll show you. When we create a new tag, we have the tag configuration and we've got a triggering. So with the configuration, this is where we actually say what type of tag it is that we want to run. Now, if you're running GA4, it's very easy. Literally, you're just going to set up GA4. When you set up GA4 for the first time, it's going to give you something called a measurement ID. So if I set this up here, okay, it's going to complain now because I'm creating a duplicate, I reckon. We're going to create a stream. You see we've got this thing called a measurement ID. Oh, there we go. So if I copy the measurement ID, then this is all that Tag Manager needs to get up and running. So now I've hooked that up, it knows which tag to use, okay? Now I can set some user properties and bits and pieces over that. To be honest with you, it's going to be quite rare that you're going to need to do that. So I'm going to skip over that. I don't think I've ever had to do that so far. So now then within Tag Manager, it knows which property to attach itself. The next thing then is the triggering. So the triggering then is under what condition do I run this tag? Now with something like Universal Analytics, that's a fairly easy one. So all we're going to do here is tick all pages, but also you'll see that we've got a load of other events here that are picked up as well. So it might be that I might say, for example, want to run that when on an email click. It might be that when we're running some audio or clicking on the telephone name, or I might want to run this every time the page views. To start with, though, we'll just have it so that this runs on every page. So every time we go to a new page, it's going to run this tag. But we can also say, for example, we can set up tags and say, give it rules where it's only certain specific pages. I'll give you a good example, maybe Jane, for you on this one, is you might have a tag that runs live chat. And let's imagine you've got your estate agency website and they've got a big sales department with one team and they've got a big lettings department with another team. You could set up a rule in Tag Manager that says, if you're on a lettings page, run this bit of code, which is the lettings team live chat. If you're on the sales team, run this bit of code, which is the sales team on live chat. So you can get down to that kind of specific if you need to. Okay, so that's then the trigger. So the trigger basically says, when I'm on all pages, then run that tag. So what I would say then is Google Tag Manager is very, very useful if you've got lots of bits of code that you need to run. It's just a nice, easy way to manage those. And if you're really, really into digital marketing and trying out different services, which I encourage you to do, Tag Manager might actually be your better option, because once we've got the Tag Manager code installed once, that's the last thing you need to do with the website. You can just run everything from here at that point. Okay, any questions at all?
Well, it's probably a bit technical for me, to be honest, on what you're saying, but what other tags, just remind me what other tags you would have. So what other things would be tags? Just sorry, everyone, if that's really...
No, that's right. So in your case, like an estate agency website, right? So you might be running Facebook Pixel, that would be a tag.
Yeah, okay,
you might have AdWords tracking code. So in other words, you might have it so that when you get to the thank you for your inquiry, you might have a conversion tag on there for your ads. So in other words, it then triggers the fact that someone's signed up.
Right.
It might be that you're using Inspectlet or something like Crazy Egg for your analyzing people and how they're using the website.
Yeah.
That could be another tag you might be using.
Fine.
So
that's all right. I just wanted to check that what sort of things. Okay, that's cool. Sorry.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Just trying to think of another one with a estate agency. What's that service that Lime used with the wide live?
Spotify? No.
No. Yeah, you could do Spotify. That'd be another tag you could put in. They had like, is it WeChat or something like that? Or they had WhatsApp built into it with a little pop up at the bottom. Do you remember?
Yeah. They got WhatsApp. Yeah.
That's it. So that would be another tag that you could.
That would be another one. Okay.
Okay. All right. So that's then I would say the two quickest ways to get yourself set up. To check it all works, really, you'd want to be looking within the properties. I'll just get rid of this because obviously I don't want to create that. And when you're actually going to be within the data streams, the main things would be to check that actually receiving data. The easiest way to check that, to be honest, is just go into reports. If you've got some numbers in there, it's all working. If you don't, it's not capturing data, but it is an important step. So once it's all set up, the stream's in place, you've either hooked it up with Tag Manager or you've hooked it up with something like SiteKit. That's pretty much all you need to do, to be honest with you. That's the main setup. There are lots of advanced settings that you might want to have a look at some point, but to be honest, straight out of the box will pretty much get you there. Okay, the next thing then to look is you can, in theory, set up custom events. And you'll notice within this section, we can actually go in and mark some as basically as conversions or not. What I'd encourage you to do is just have a very quick look at this, but maybe have a look at it around about 24 hours after it's installed, because what will happen is once you set up that data stream for the first time, Google will start capturing that information and learning about your website and how it's set up. So underneath this setup assistant, I'd probably encourage you in a few days' time after it's all set up, just go and have a look at the events tag, because at that point, it would work out what events that it can listen to. So again, it's listening to your website through the document object model. So it's hearing everything that's going on. Now here then, what we can do is it will say, right, well, these are all the different events that I found on your website that have occurred in the last 24 or 48 hours. Say, for example, on my website, I've got live chat. Not everyone has that. So it's actually heard a chat started event. So really then, this is down for me to go, oh, chat started. Yeah, that's important, because if someone has started a chat with me, that's the intent to get in touch. That's important to me. I want to mark that as a conversion. Likewise then, a click, maybe not so much, because that's a click on any menu item. It's a bit too broad. It could be click on the live chat widget. That was something I'd be important. The contact form, email clicks. These are all different events that basically I've just then flagged here. Potential inquiry, pre-chat survey finished. I want to basically flag up all those different events. Now, what you will find then is every website will have different events. These are just the ones set up for my website. Your website will be different again. If you've got many, many forms and lots of widgets and things installed, you're likely to have maybe even more events than this. But it's certainly worth just dropping in there a few days after it's installed, and then you can just mark off the ones that you feel are important that you want to measure.
Can I ask another question? Sorry, really relevant. Fly message displayed. What would that be, like your book evaluation or something like that? Is that what that fly message means? I don't know what that is.
Oh, fly message. Ah, right. Trying to remember what that is. I had a plugin installed that just kind of plopped up. Fly message install. What was that? I'll tell you what it was. Is I'm using one live chat. I'm using Tildio now. I switched over and used another one called Fly Chat. This was like a couple of months ago, so I think it's still got that event from that previous live chat.
Oh, I see. So it's not something that we need.
It's not a custom one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry, it is a custom one. It's not an out-of-the-box one.
Okay, all right. So I'll remove that from my list. Thank you.
Yeah. But I mean, that's just a good idea just to go in there and see what you do have.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's get started with the main reports. So we will find they're over here. Now, the main thing is it's not all that much different to Universal Analytics, but the big difference is we still have sessions. So think of a session as someone up in Google clicking the record button on the old tape machine and listening. We still have a session timeout. So with Universal Analytics, the session timeout was 30 minutes. So why is that a big deal? Well, with a session timeout, it basically means that if it doesn't hear anything, if you're not doing anything for 30 minutes, it will eventually stop the tape machine and go, right, nothing else is going to happen here. That was exactly the same with Universal Analytics, but we need to just be mindful of that. The reason is because if we go onto a website, for example, I'm sat there avidly clicking around and then suddenly phone goes off, sat here like that, yabbering away, 31 minutes later, God, that's 31 minutes of my life I won't get back. Right, 32 minutes now, click to carry on with the website. What's actually going to happen is it's going to start a new session. Why? Because my old one's timed out. I've been inactive for 30 minutes. Google, for all its known, I could have gone down to the pub or gone to a meeting. So it's actually started a new session. Now, this is the thing. In terms of the reports, it will see you as a returning user. Well, you are kind of, but you're kind of not, because you've just been sat in that same seat just for 31 minutes. So sometimes it's very easy to look at the stats, look at returning users, think in our mind, oh, that must have been someone went to me on the Monday and sat there all week thinking, I really must go back to FL1 Digital. And then they came back on the Friday to see me. No, more often than not, I'll tell you it's this. It's where the session's timed out from that first visit. And then, in essence, it's all within the same measurement. Now, what you can do then within the properties is just up that time out. And sometimes that's quite interestingly, literally, how much then it completely skews that whole statistic. And you'll find that actually, if you even up it to an hour, you find you get much less repeating visitors. So in essence, what you've got after an hour then is a much better representation of people that really did go away for a noted period of time and come back, as opposed to get caught up in a phone call, will go to look and then carry on looking within the same session. Now, where you might want to think about upping that session time out also is, let's imagine you are on a website where you expect people to be there for a long time. For example, something like an e-learning website where you're sat there watching a video, it could be for 30 minutes before you next interact. Or what about Netflix or a streaming site? You know, if you're showing hour-long documentaries or training videos, yeah, they're going to be there for a while, and no, they're not going to be interacting very much. So those sort of sites, you might want to think about upping the session. Otherwise, you will get quite skewed characteristics.
How do you do that?
That's underneath the, I think it's underneath here. There's session settings under here. I'm sure it's data settings, is it? Can't remember now. Property settings, there we go. I'll dig it out. I'm sure it's under here somewhere. I'm sure, yeah, I know it's under here somewhere, but I'll find out for you, come back to you if that's all right. But I remember seeing it the other day and thinking, oh, they've kept it. So like previous version of analytics, then we have users coming in, and then we have new users. So in other words, where we first seen that user, bear in mind that a new user is only going to be within this time period. We then have the average engagement time. So in other words, how long they're on the website and engaged. And then revenue as well. So we are able, with this version of analytics, just like the previous one, if we're feeding revenue information into Google, then we can also track that kind of thing too. One thing that's quite interesting that I think will probably be a better feature over time is that now GA4 is starting to use AI to try and predict what sort of outcomes you might be looking at. So that's used insights. We'll have a quick look at those a little bit later on. So here then we've got underneath this section here, we've got acquisition. So in other words, where people came in. So we've got a lot of paid search coming into our website. We've got direct. So in other words, they've just gone straight to the website. They've not been referred. We also have organic search. So in other words, where they've literally typed something into Google and found us via a search engine. We have referrals. So referral then is where they've been referred via another website. It could be a blog. It could be, say, for example, someone else's website. Could be a review site. It's another website, so not a search engine per se. Organic social, so social media marketing. So in other words, it's come via one of the social networks. And we've also got email in there, which is another one. The reason I don't have it here is because I haven't done an email marketing campaign for a while. So then we've got our top campaigns down here as well. Now, because we know the IP address, as we know from the HTTP details, we're also able to look that up. So there are various services around the world that we can use to look up an IP address and see where they are in the world. It's reasonably accurate. I wouldn't stake your last dollar on it, but it will certainly give you a good indication of where in the world most of your traffic's coming from. Again, we can still see the activity over time. We've got that kind of information there. And we've also then got our activity by cohort as well there. So we can see when our busiest peaks and times are. Down here, then we've got our top pages, and then we can see our top events. As I'd expect it to be, something like a page view is my top event there. But I can see out of that, we've got 533 sessions started. So these are a bit like we had sessions in Universal Analytics. It's the same thing. But I can also see them in terms of first visits, we've got 370 of those. And notice then the conversions. The good thing is I've not had to set any of this up apart from just ticking a few boxes. So I can see that I've had 26 people click on an email link to get in touch with us. I've had 3 form submissions and 2 workshop inquiries. I don't have sales set up on here, but that's entirely possible to do it. It uses a conversion tracking technique that's similar to the old one. So it might be, say, for example, if I had a contact form that people could then fill in, and I knew that every time that they'd filled that form in, I'd made, for example, £50 or something, I can set up what's called a conversion tracking goal that would feed back in and tell it that an inquiry has occurred and we've made £50, at which point the monetization things will start kicking. And one of the nice things about GA4 is the fact that a lot of that works quite well out of the box if you're using something like an online shop like WooCommerce. So there are a good couple of plugins that will literally wire up all those different events for you. So in which case you can start to see things like engagement through the shopping process, cart abandonment, all of that kind of stuff are all set up as custom events. So we're able to track that kind of thing too. So generally speaking, when you get underneath the hood, so now that we understand that everything is event driven, really, it's not a huge amount different. So we then have underneath acquisition. So acquisition is pretty much exactly the same as Universal Analytics. How do we acquire these people? Where do they come from? And again, we've got similar ideas. We have search, medium, that's all in there. So again, just as we had in Universal Analytics, we can work out whether it's an organic referral, whether it's paid. And again, we can work out referral sources. One thing that I will say, which is extremely frustrating, is with GA4, you might remember that you could look at, say, for example, a list of all your referrers and work out where they came from, or just click on a page and work out how the referrals to that page are working. GA4 does not do that. You've got to create a custom report to do that. The good thing is for you, what I thought about, and I know I've reached out to a couple to ask already, is I've got like a little cheat sheet at the end of like the common things that I've tried to do in Universal Analytics and spent hours hunting around in GA4 to try and work out to do. That being one of them. You'd think that you'd just be able to click on all your referrals and see a list of all your referrals. Nah. But don't worry, I've gone and looked it all up. I've got all the instructions and they'll be part of the presentation that I'll send afterwards. So underneath that then, the overviews are a good place to start. It shows you much the sort of similar information. And again, we can go through, and this is what I'm talking about. I can't click to, frustrating. But what you do have then is we can look for different channel sources. So if I wanted to kind of boil that down as more medium, here you go. I can literally just change that to source and medium. Now I've got a slightly better information of what I was doing before. If I then open that list out, I'm starting to get a much better idea now of where all my referrals are. Okay, so just changing a couple of things, I've got a much more sensible list. This is much more like what we used to see then in Universal Analytics. So next up then, in terms of, we can see I've got user acquisition and traffic acquisition. So in other words, where all the traffic came from here, similar kind of idea. And again, I can change the, there we go, changes to get a slightly better view in terms of exactly where they came from. The engagement then, so in other words, what people have done. So the engagement, I think, actually is probably slightly better than it was in Universal Analytics. So I can see all the top pages I've got here. So again, underneath that, I can track my pages and screens. I can also track landing pages. So in other words, where people came into the website for the first time. I've got my activity over time there, where I can have a look at, and user stickiness. So in other words, how many people are sticking around my website and how much engagement am I getting from that one. I've also got my events. So the events then are the things that have triggered off of my website, and bear in mind everything is all specific to this particular time period. So again, I can see all the things that have happened on the website, think where people have clicked, where they've been scrolled, where I've got form submissions, etc. I'm able to track all of that lot straight out of the box. I've also got my conversions, which I can have a look at, and bear in mind I've defined a few of these. So I've got email clicks here, form submissions, workshop inquiries, again, so I can track where these are going on. Now from there then, it might be then I could then go through, click on my email clicks, and I could then change that default group to, if I look at, say, for example, source or medium, that basically tells me, for example, where all my email clicks originated from. So if I look at the source, I can see that most of those were from Google or even Google Mail in this case. So at this level, I'm able to then drop down and start to analyze exactly where ultimately those sources of traffic were, which generated email clicks. So that side of things, I quite like. I think that works quite well with GA4. Pages and screens, very similar. So before we had this underneath the behavior section in Universal Analytics, same thing. So we can see what our top pages are. Again, if I want to see where that tracks through, it's the sort of thing that I could then just easily just go down here and say, for example, I think it's under user traffic source. If I want to see where those actually originated from, I could do it that way. One thing that is a bit annoying is I can't just click through from here. So one way to do it then is just by creating a custom report, filtering it out, and then looking at the traffic sources. Again, I've got some notes in the next slide on how to do that kind of stuff. Likewise with landing pages. So in other words, your landing pages, rather than being the most popular pages, is where people actually entered the website for the first time. For me, this is a definitely useful one, but you'll notice then we've got no more bounce rate. It doesn't exist anymore. It's gone. But what we do have then is the average engagement time per sessions. That does give us an idea of how engaged people are when they land on those pages, which, if I'm completely honest, I think is actually a lot more useful than the bounce rate. It tells us a lot more about what's going on.
Can I ask just a quick question? You know, you've got the not set there at number 3. I've seen that before. What does that mean?
Oh, yes, it's just, yeah, so we're down to the user permissions. It's not able to track that information. That was exactly the same with Universal Analytics, if you remember. Yeah, that's not changed, sadly.
So is that just a page that's not labelled up or something like that? What's it measured? 47 sessions on what? Yeah,
it's where it can't track it, it's blocked. So
okay.
Some of the reasons it might be where, say, for example, people have come for a proxy, or they might be using incognito mode, but it's not able to track. But it knows it's had 47 sessions, but it doesn't actually know where they've come from.
Right, that makes sense.
So it's always a bit inevitable, actually. In fact, I think I've got a good article that goes into a bit more detail around that if you want to see that. One of the things I also like about this is now it's actually brought through Search Console. So this was a little bit clunky, if I'm honest, the way that it worked with previous versions of Google Analytics. But it actually then will bring through search queries from Google Search Console. So I'm able to track that kind of thing as well, which we weren't able to do before. Then underneath your user acquisition here, underneath attributes, we can then track things like, say, for example, where people are in the country. We've got that kind of thing. We've got the demographic information here, users by age. And remember what I said earlier. So this information largely then is going to be coming from people signed into their Google account where it's able to access that information. So we've got much of that information there, the same things before. Underneath the text section then, this really then is where you're going to find information about who's using your device. So in other words, we can see what type of browser people are using. We can see what operating system we're on. Here we've got the same as we had before, I think it was behavior and mobile, wasn't it? So we can see how many people are using desktop versus tablet, mobile. We've got that underneath that section there. So as you see, we've got largely the same reports. There we go. Cool. All right. So the last thing then is what I did here. There we go. Is for me, this is a quick cheat sheet of the top things that I was looking for and had to scratch around and find. So for me, the top sources, that's underneath acquisition and traffic acquisition, the top referrers, which is underneath acquisition. And then we have to change the session to source and medium. Mobile usage, just where we looked underneath there. So again, you can just go underneath user and tech overview. Top pages, that's underneath the engagement section, then pages and screens. Top landing pages, again, likewise underneath engagement and landing pages. And then to get sources for a specific page, I was really quite surprised how hard this was. So if you go underneath acquisition, user acquisition, customize it, add a filter, select landing page, then it will show you everything. So actually what you're doing is here is you're starting by your acquisition, then filtering out by page, and then you can then see where it was. That was the quickest way I found to do and get you that report. Okay, that brings us up to an hour then. So hopefully short and sweet and give you enough to sort of get off and running. Any questions at all?
Can I ask a question? Sorry, how do I find, can you just quickly show me how to find what people have typed into Google in order to get to you? Because that's something I always
right, it should be set up properly underneath the search console and queries.
Queries, search console.
I'll tell you what, I'll add that to the list.
Okay.
Cool. Any other questions at all?
Just a very basic question, and I'm sorry if it sounds a bit stupid, is that when I looked online, it's saying add a Google Analytics 4 property to a site that already has analytics. How do I actually get it? Do I just go and onto my Google account and register, or how do I do that, Jason?
I think yours.
Do you want to send me
Google Analytics, or do you know what, for you, I'd probably recommend even using the Sitekit option.
Okay, can you send me the link for that then, and just
yeah, it'll do it. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll install the plugin for you, and I'll give you some quick instructions. And I recommend you do it. I'll tell you why. Is because you'll probably like to be logged into Google, and then literally it will just walk you through it. I could do it for you, but in all truth, what will happen is it will be, I'll try and install it, then I'll be phoning you up every 5 minutes and saying Google sent you a code, and it'll be back and forward all afternoon. So
yes, I'd rather do it anyway. I feel I want to feel as though I might have some control over it. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I'll send you a link over. I'll get it all set up. And if you just take it over there, have Google installed in one browser, and it will literally walk you through the whole process.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
No problem.
So we basically have to do now, we've come off here, is go on to our analytics and do that complete GA4 setup. That's where we
largely
start.
it's just ticking boxes, to be honest with you.
And ticking boxes. So are you around?
70% of it is irrelevant.
I'm just going to do it now.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Did that help at all?
Definitely.
Yeah,
that was really useful. Thank you. Appreciated that.
Really helpful. Thank you.
Excellent. So if it's all right, I'm just going to grab a cheeky screen grab here just for the socials. So if you want to, that's it.
Yeah, glasses off.
Ready? There we go.
Can you tag us all?
Yeah, I'll tag you all. Is anyone that would not like me to do that?
No, it's fun.
No, it's fun.
No one cares. Cool.
Excellent.
Jason,
Thank you so much for your time.
That's all right. I'll get the PowerPoint presentation, and also I've recorded this, so I'll send you a link over to the video.
Perfect. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Right,
No worries.
thank you.
Bye.
Cheers, Jason. Bye.